We are now live. Welcome to the show, everyone. Today is July 2nd, 2026. 250 years ago, the Second Continental Congress voted in favor of independence and started a country that would become the most powerful, truly, that the world has ever seen. A nation free and prosperous whose citizens invented heavier-than-air powered flight and eventually planted its flag on the moon. Today, we're going to show you that although we're definitely suffering some blows, I'm not going to lie, there's a little bit of a degradation of our way of life in some areas, but the United States is still kicking. We've got good years ahead of us yet, so long as we keep the fight going anyway, regardless of unhinged socialist candidates winning elections and some unfortunate Supreme Court rulings. All of this on episode 543 of the In the Tank podcast.
We are in the very midst of revolution, the most complete, unexpected, and remarkable of any in the history of the world. How few of the human race have ever had an opportunity of choosing a system of government for themselves and their children. I believe, sirs, that the hour has come. My judgment approves this measure, and my whole heart is in it. All that I have, all that I am, and all that I hope in this life, I am now ready to stake upon it. While I live, let me have a country. A free country.
All right, with that, welcome to the In the Tank podcast. I am Linnea, Lueken, your host, and as always, we also have Jim Lakely, Vice President and Director of Communications at the Heartland Institute, Sam Karnick, Senior Fellow at the Heartland Institute, and also Chris Talgo, who is our editorial expert here, and also for today's special Independence Day episode, we also have Justin Haskins. Justin is Vice President of Policy at Heartland. You might know him from his appearances on the Glenn Beck program and Fox and Friends. He's very widely published and has written several books, including Socialism is Evil, The Moral Case Against Marx's Radical Dream. Thank you, Justin, for joining us. Should be a pretty good time. I did hear a rumor that you are a fan, in fact, of the United States of America. Is this true?
I am today. I am today. Yes, I am. I'm glad to be here. 250th anniversary. It's a big deal. I feel like I have to come out of my hiding lair, to do the show. And I look forward to coming back 250 years from now. And that'll be my next appearance. It'll be fun.
Excellent. All right.
If you thought boosting Justin up that obsequiously in this would get him to come on the show more often, experience tells me that that's not going to happen. But I don't know. I like what I heard. Yeah, I did like what I heard.
Yeah, when we all have our brains planted into robots or whatever it is that Elon Musk wants us to do, we'll celebrate this show again. We'll have I don't know, tens of thousands of episodes of In the Tank. Before we get started, if you want to support the show, you can go to heartland.org/inthetank and donate there. Please also click the thumbs up to like the video, and remember that sharing it helps to break through YouTube suppression. Also, subscribe to our channel if you aren't yet. I always forget to say that, but please do that. Even just leaving a comment also helps us. If you're an audio listener, you can help us out by leaving a nice review. And just to make sure that our following discussions here are uninterrupted, I want to start off the show by talking about another fellow patriot and what he can do for you. So a lot of people in conservative and libertarian and in emergency prep spaces are going to hit you with ads for buying precious metals. I don't think there's a single major conservative organization that doesn't have some kind of a metal sponsor. And they're not wrong that they're a good investment, but you want to be careful about who you're buying your metals from. At In the Tank, we trust Advisor Metals over all of the other guys. And that's because we know that the person running the place is the best of the best. A great friend of liberty and, fervent patriot, Ira Bershetsky owns and is the managing member of Advisor Metals. He has decades of experience in precious metals and is the only person in the physical precious metals industry who has the Commodities Futures Trading Commission federal registration. That's a lot of words. What does it mean for you? Well, it means everything that Ira or a member of his team says to you has to be factual. So there's no sales pitch or bait and switch. Ira is held to the highest ethical standards, and there is full transparency, which is, very much lacking in other places nowadays. If you want to diversify your investment portfolio and your savings, if you're planning for retirement and are concerned about economic uncertainty, which is not unreasonable at this point, if you want a tangible asset that is easy to buy and sell, you can secure your assets with a wide range of physical precious metals by getting in touch with our friend Ira at Advisor Metals. Ira is going to make it easy for you, so please visit climaterealismshow.com/metals, and you can leave your information for Ira and get started with investing in precious metals to expand your current portfolio. Go to climaterealismshow.com/metals, and when you talk to Ira, make sure you let him know that we are the ones who sent you, okay? That helps us while you're helping your financial future by diversifying with precious metals from Advisor Metals. Thank you, guys. Yeah, no cute little transition for that one. I really appreciate Ira. He is a patriot. He is helping us out, and he will also help you out. But I did want to make sure that we kind of had an uninterrupted stream of discussion about our other topics today. We're going to start with Unhinged, a little bit of bad news to start the day, and that is that DSA is still leading the way here. Feels like Groundhog Day. Once again, we have a Democratic Socialist of America candidate usurping a more traditional incumbent Democrat in their elections. The latest is a congressional candidate for Colorado District 1, Ethiopian-born Melat Kiros, beat longtime Democrat incumbent. She was on, this particular newcomer was on the alleged dog zapper Hassan Piker's stream, saying that she wants ICE abolished, that she wants amnesty and citizenship for all illegals. She said that the United States is to blame for 9/11. She wants a trans Bill of Rights. And she suggested that Israel does not have a right to exist at all. All of the things that modern Democrats apparently are big fans of. We have clips here too, if we can pull some of those up.
Denver's not New York, but Denver actually rates socialism higher than we rate capitalism by 4 points. And, when I talk to voters about what we're doing and why I'm a democratic socialist, I remind them that we have socialism already, right? It's in the roads that we drive on. It's in the schools we send our kids to. It's in the fire stations we call upon. I'm just asking that we extend that security to our healthcare, to our housing, to our nutritional food, to our higher education, so that we're actually meeting the basic needs of everyday working families in this country. So that we're not just getting by and surviving, so that we're actually thriving. And in the wealthiest, most powerful country on earth, we're not asking for much.
So, Justin, I have two questions for you that I think, to be first, I think you'll agree that these people, who are being supported by Mom Dami, people who seem to us to be like crazy and really radical, but they're not stupid. And in a way, this makes them a real threat to take seriously. This woman is a lot like AOC, I think. And I think that conservatives made a mistake early on with AOC by kind of brushing her off as like this silly little person. And look at all the influence that she has now. But I mean, our fire department's socialism.
I love the argument. I've heard it many, many times. The argument goes, because there is some form, so socialism is basically the collective ownership and management of property. And it's on a sliding scale. So obviously you can have a little socialism, you can have a socialistic program or something like that. But the more you go down the line, the more things are collectively owned and managed, the more socialistic your society is. And at some point you cross over into socialism as an actual economic system that you have. What I always find so amazing about this is they try to say, don't worry about socialism. Forget about, like I know tens of millions of people have died all over the world from this ideology, but don't think about like the Soviet Union version or the Chinese version or the Angolans or, Venezuela or any of the other failures. Don't think about them. Cuba, forget about all those. Think about the fire department. See, that's all we want is something kind of like the fire department. And because we already have something that is, sort of collectively owned and managed, like the fire department, the police department, the court system, that means we already have socialism. And it's like, well, by that logic, a little bit of socialism means we have socialism. Well, then don't we have at least a little bit of capitalism? Doesn't that mean that we have capitalism? So it's just a stupid argument on its face. Obviously, it doesn't make any sense. Foundationally, the reason that they make it is because there's a natural, totally reasonable skepticism of their ideology on its face. Everybody knows that, well, lots of people in the past who've called themselves socialists ended up, doing a lot of horrible things all over the world. And so I'm skeptical. And so what they have to do is convince you that, this isn't as dangerous as it needs to be. Now, that should be a red flag, because if somebody has to convince you from the very start that, yeah, I know I'm calling myself and I'm subscribing to many of the same ideas as the ones that killed tens of millions of people all over the world, but I'm not that version. I'm a nicer version of it. It's if anyone starts out a conversation like that, you should run for the hills. That's not what you want at all. And I think that fundamentally is the problem. The reason that they're growing in popularity, as we'll talk about more, I'm sure, is because lots of people, young people especially, believe, and I think and in many ways are right to believe this, believe the current system is fundamentally deeply flawed. It's broken. It's corrupt in a lot of ways. It favors some over others. It's a lot of the same things that Donald Trump has said, for that matter, right? And they want radical, transformative change because they feel like this system is completely unfair. And socialists have always, from the time of Karl Marx, even before Karl Marx, there's always been socialists who have said, we're going to blow up the existing system. So they appeal to people who really feel like the current system is not working for them. The problem is, and this is the biggest thing that conservatives, I think, need to learn to communicate to these people. The reason the system is so screwed up is because of government and socialistic ideas. That's the reason it's screwed up. So anytime someone says, well, look at all the crony capitalism, or look at all of the wealth disparity and the rich have all this money, or look at, how people can't afford all of these things, the student loan crisis, all of this is the cause of government meddling in our society. And so when people on the left say our system is, systemically racist, and so we need to blow up the system, what they're actually saying, they don't even realize it, is the government is systemically racist. And then the solution is to give more power to the government, but only some parts of it. We'll abolish the other part. It's like, that doesn't make any sense. The people you think have ruined the country are the people you want to empower to have even more control over the country. And I just don't think I think there's a real disconnect there that intuitively conservatives all understand. But we have a tendency to fall into the trap of saying, well, actually things aren't as bad as they make it sound to be, or, socialism doesn't work, and we'll focus on socialism as an ideology in and of itself. And we don't spend enough time pointing out the reason that you feel this way, young people who like socialism. There's a big part of what you're saying and feeling that's right, but the cause of it is the very thing that you're now saying you want more of. And so it's like the equivalent of rewarding the arsonist, by saying, well, we're gonna give the arsonist, we're gonna put him in charge of the fire department now. It's like, well, that doesn't make any sense. There's too many fires, so let's give the arsonist control of the fire department. It doesn't make any sense. And I think that we have to do a better job of not dismissing young people's concerns, acknowledging there's all sorts of problems. Sam's like an expert in this area. The biggest reason we have wealth disparity in this country is because the Fed and the government have created trillions of dollars, printed trillions of dollars, and distributed it. And most of that money has ended up in the hands of a relatively small group, relatively speaking, of individuals and corporations and sectors of the economy. That's why the wealth disparity exists. We have so much corruption in the economy that needs to be fixed, but it's all driven by government and socialistic ideas.
Doesn't anyone notice this? I feel like I'm taking crazy pills.
Exactly. I do all the time.
Another side of this, though, is the lack of virtue among young Americans, because we're a couple days away from the 250th anniversary. I know we're going to talk a lot about this later on in the program, but one of the things that the founding fathers did emphasize is that this sort of a government can only work with a virtuous population. And I fear that not only is the economic stuff totally upside down and skewed and crony capitalism and all that, but you've also got a generation of young people who don't value the dignity of hard work. They don't necessarily honor self-dependence and self-reliance, all those types of things. And I think that that's another reason why Democratic Socialists are winning. And if you look at the people who are voting for them, it's mostly young Americans and very educated Americans. And I think that's also part of the reason that the long march through the institutions has just been so valuable for the left, because they realized if we can get into higher education systems, into the K through 12 public education system, and we can try to brainwash those people, that's going to pay big dividends. And I think that is paying big dividends. And I put 5 years of my life into trying to abut that, and I felt that it was almost a futile fool's errand. And I kind of hate to say it, but I feel like I'm right on that, because schools nowadays, I think, are doing an even worse job than when I was there. So there's a two-pronged approach, and I think that we got to hit it from both sides of that.
What Justin and Chris have said is absolutely spot on. All I would add is that the way this has worked out is that creating a corrupt system and a rigged system has given people an excuse to say we need massive reforms. And the only way we can get those massive reforms is through government. But it was government that created, as Justin pointed out, and as he noted, I've written regularly, it's government that created all the corruption. Without government, there wouldn't have been all of this, and the Federal Reserve making money so cheap that it created incredible distortions throughout the economy, and in particular sent a huge amount of money to people who are already wealthy. You take a system like that, and you build a system like that, it's the proof that you can't have a little socialism for any long period of time. No, you're going to get more and more and more, because the system that you create creates corruption, and it corrupts the souls of the people. And that's where we're at. That's what Chris was looking at in those classrooms. And the souls that were most corrupted were those of the teachers and administrators themselves. So the entire system is built to move more and more power to the center and to give the people who are in power more and more power. And the only way you can get rid of it is by breaking those bonds. And we're going to be talking a little bit about some of that today, because it's possible to break those bonds, but it takes an incredible amount of will.
Let me just add about the election of Malat Kiros. First of all, buyer beware when you vote for someone whose name sounds like a Star Wars character. That should always do a little bit more research just to make sure that this person is acceptable. She talks so fast. She's she mentioned in there, Justin and everybody, socialism for food. That's been tried. In fact, it was tried in the 1950s in China. That's not that long ago. It's the memory. It's in the very memory of many people alive today. Tens of millions of people starved because the socialists, the communists, which is where these people are going. That's actually what they are. They thought we can centrally plan something as complicated as a country's agriculture system and make sure everybody is fed, and not just fed, but fed better than the system that they replaced. And tens of millions of people starved. And so everything, every sector of an economy that socialists think they can plan goes to ruin. The only question is how fast it happens. It always goes to ruin. These socialists are like Malat Kiros are talking about. We need socialism is just giving people health care. We did that already. It was called Obamacare, and it destroyed there was probably a little bit of a chance that you could get some market forces into the healthcare system in the United States to help bring down prices. There is almost no way to do that now, thanks to Obamacare. All we've done is enriched insurance companies and made people have worse healthcare for triple the price. Ask any small business who has to provide healthcare for their employees how prices have gone over the last 10 years. It's outrageously high, and that brings down, I mean, it's a disaster. But about Malat Kiros, she has a law degree from Notre Dame. She's 29 years old. She was fired from her law firm, by the way, for publicly calling them out for not supporting Palestine after October 7th. According to her financial disclosure report, she made a total of $30,000 last year, and she's $250,000 in debt, and the Democrats in Colorado elected her to Congress. As Chris pointed out, these socialists, they say they're supposedly advocating for the working class. In every one of these elections where the socialist candidates have won, the working class has rejected them overwhelmingly at the polls. In New York City, all of the support for the socialists who won in New York City came from young, affluent white women with high educations. The working men and minorities who are, driving buses, who are plumbers, who are the working class that they're supposedly working for, they overwhelmingly rejected these socialists. And in fact, almost to a man and woman, every one of these socialist candidates for the working man are trust fund babies who have never held real jobs. Even Graham Plattner, the fake oysterman up in Maine, he went to private schools. His oyster business is basically, he has one customer, his mother's restaurant. It's not a real business. It's all fake. Socialism is all fake. That's why the term Potemkin village is understood by people, because socialism and communism produces fakery. They have to produce fakery by force in order to, put on a face that people think it works. And just one last thing, when Justin touched on this, when Obama was president, socialism was sold with a smiling face, just like the smiling face of Zohran Mamdani. And I remember it being described as, government is just what we all do together. And socialism is just us all coming together. No, government is force. We only do it together by force. At the point of a gun, actually. The clip at the beginning of our intro today was from the miniseries John Adams on HBO. I put it on there because I was watching that. Lots of clips from John Adams this week, and I started tearing up a little bit. We were left a country in which we were allowed to build our lives the way we felt, and to have government not telling us how we must organize ourselves in our smaller communities and even as individuals. And we're giving it all away by supporting these socialists and communists, really, who believe that that man cannot be free because freedom maybe creates inequality, and that we need, frankly, an oppressive government to make sure we all stay in the line that they make for us. Happy Independence Day, everybody.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, so that you all see why I put this in the unhinged section at the start of the thing, because it does get us a little bit worked up. I don't know if we want to play the other clips or if we just want to move along here. Is there one in particular, Jim, that you feel very heated about that you think our audience needs to see?
There's one, and it's only 3 seconds, and this is one of the leaders of the Democrat Socialists of America. Let's just call them commies. It's 3 seconds. This is the shortest clip ever in the history of this show.
Okay.
Our goal is liberation. Our goal is communism.
So, did you catch that? We'll try it again.
I mean, our goal is liberation. Our goal is communism.
Our goal is liberation. Our goal is communism. That's your Democrat Socialists of America, out of their own mouths. Don't forget it.
Absolutely. And that is always the case. Socialism is always just like the foot in the door for communism. But I'm going to move us along here to our Supreme Court rulings this week. I kind of didn't want to touch on any real news this week, but I thought this is kind of like a news and policy show, so we should probably talk a little bit about some contemporary news and policy. But before we get into our main topic today, which is the independence stuff, I want to talk about these 3 particular SCOTUS decisions or upcoming decisions. So the first is going to be Trump versus Barbara, which had to do with the president's executive order with regards to birthright citizenship. Trump versus Slaughter, which had to do with firing executive branch officials, and some upcoming cases that SCOTUS has agreed to hear having to do with bans of AR-15 platform rifles in Grant versus Higgins and Viramontes versus Cook County. Hey, I know that place. We will start with the birthright citizenship case because that's the one that everyone is completely melting down over, as though the decision means that the United States is suddenly incinerated right now with no recourse whatsoever. If I only relied on like people on Twitter or X and on some of our more excitable right-wing blogs and stuff, that would be what I took away from this. But reading a couple other people who are a little bit more level-headed about it is a great comfort. So I'm going to read to us from Hot Air here. The Supreme Court finished its term with a 6-3 decision authored by Chief Justice John Roberts that essentially reaffirms the text of the 14th Amendment, as well as the court's 1898 decision in Wong Kim Ark. Roberts starts off by noting that both of these precedents were firmly based in English common law and that the text of the 14th Amendment nearly lifts from that. Birth under the jurisdiction of the United States grants citizenship, Robert writes. Held, children born in the United States to parents unlawfully or temporarily present are subject to the jurisdiction of the United States and are citizens at birth under the 14th Amendment Citizenship Clause. Justice Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito both wrote lengthy dissents. When Trump initially issued Executive Order 14-160, many were rightfully skeptical of the argument that a president could effect this kind of change through executive power alone. Had Congress created a statute defining birthright citizenship more narrowly, the change might have had more chance of passing muster. Roberts' constitutional argument in the controlling opinion all but precludes any approach other than passage and ratification of another amendment to redefine citizenship. In his partial dissent, Justice Brett Kavanaugh writes that the ruling should have confined itself to the existing statute. He writes, I respectfully disagree with the court's constitutional holding. In my view, the executive order does not violate the 14th Amendment, but the order does contravene a federal statute. Congress could, consistent with the 14th Amendment, amend that statute or otherwise enact new legislation establishing exceptions to birthright citizenship for children born to foreign citizens unlawfully or temporarily in the country, but Congress has not yet done so. And the writer here also notes that Trump kind of surprisingly took the loss fairly well. Instead of just like trashing all of our justices and saying that they're garbage and they should all be gone, he instead focused on wins in other cases. So I'm gonna start with Sam here. Sam, is this single ruling the end of the country as we knew it?
No.
Is it over?
No, it's not. And in fact, I would first, I'll start by pointing out that what Justice Kavanaugh did there was something that he's done before and that I've written about and spoken about before, which is he actually tells the administration and the Congress what they can do to get what they were trying to do in the thing that was just struck down. So that was a move that Kavanaugh has done before, and frankly, I love it. Now, it's true that this is a loss. We didn't get what we wanted, but look at it this way: why is this an issue today? Why is it an issue today? It's an issue today because after 150 some years, 175 years, it's an issue today because things have changed in the political realm, not in the Constitution. What happened was that there was no big complaints about birthright citizenship until 2021. What happened then? So what happened is you can defend the borders. We have every right to do that. And the Trump administration is now doing that. And they're doing it with great success. So birthright citizenship is not a problem unless you don't enforce immigration laws and you really don't enforce the Constitution itself, the rules in the Constitution itself, which are built for a country that has borders. They're not built for a borderless country. So this is a big deal right now because of what happened, let's see, 5 years ago now. So it's not a curse that's going to destroy the country. Now, the decision that the majority made was wrong. Their interpretation of the 14th Amendment and of the 15th Amendment and of the history leading to it and of the statutes around it is all entirely wrong. And I've written about this in the past, that they just got it completely wrong. That said, what Kavanaugh pointed out was, even if they're all wrong, don't worry about it. Just Congress, you pass a law to this effect, and we will have to let it through. We will have to endorse it. And he's absolutely right. It will get endorsed. And that's the next step. And I think that's what made Trump so sanguine about this. It's like, yeah, I know it's a bad thing and it's dumb and stupid and wrong. And it's up to justices like Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito to point that out. But the bottom line is that this doesn't really change anything. It's a typical John Roberts move in that it doesn't change anything, but it leads to a situation where everything can change very much for the better. So yes, it was wrong and stupid and dumb in my view, but we're going to get past this and we're going to get a much better and clearer system in its place. So thank you very much, John Roberts.
I think the onus for this was the fact that China has sent north of 1 million people to the United States, obviously mothers who are a couple of weeks away from pregnancy to have their child. That child is then automatically an American citizen. That child then goes back to China and they can come back to America and they can vote in our elections. They can work for our government. They can steal our trade secrets. They can do whatever they want. And also due to chain migration, they can come they can sponsor their family members. They can sponsor all sorts of extended family members. What I think the problem is that the 14th Amendment was supposed to apply after the Civil War to freed slaves, and it has been stretched way beyond that, where now if a cruise ship docks at a U.S. port and a woman gets off board and she happens to be pregnant and just has one toe on U.S. soil, guess what? That child then is a U.S. citizen for life. I don't think that's the way it should be. I disagree with the ruling, and I think that birthright citizenship should not apply to anyone who just happens to be the United States at the time of their birth.
So Senator Paul proposed a constitutional amendment, which I kind of rolled my eyes at. I thought it was like Congress can't even pass the SAVE Act You really think we're going to get a constitutional amendment through? It just feels
I
like
can't even pass a budget. They're going to pass a
I'm
constitutional
so
amendment?
sick and tired of guys who should have their heads on their shoulders, like smart guys like Senator Paul, who know that this is just like theater, are playing along with it and just doing theater stuff. Really annoys the hell out of me to be a little bit worked up about it. But the issue of Congress actually passing something on this, if we could get them together enough to even pass a SAVE Act, they might pass something like the way that Kavanaugh suggested.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I actually had not spoken to Sam about this at all, but my take coming into it was that Kavanaugh was the only one that I thought really got it right. I think the arguments about the definitions of some of the words in the 14th Amendment are, I mean, I have a tendency to agree with Alito and Thomas, but I mean, could you make an argument that's reasonable enough that the common law and all this other stuff? I mean, that's the thing with the Supreme Court, is if you give them just a crack, then you can get almost anything that you want out of it, because you could argue all sorts of things. We're talking about intent and meaning of words from people who never really, some people expounded on it, but then other people didn't, and there's speculation and all this stuff.
I've never heard of lawyers doing something like that.
It's just brutal. I mean, constitutional law is in effect the Supreme Court deciding whatever they want to decide, changing the rules all the time, overturning their own precedents constantly. Even though they say that it's really important not to overturn precedents, they do it all the time. And so, I mean, the real issue for me is the 14th Amendment, I think, has done horrible. This is, I know, a very controversial thing to say. The 14th Amendment has done horrible damage to this country because of how poorly it was written. It was written in a very bad way. It was so ambiguous. They had a very specific meaning in mind, not just related to this, but all sorts of other things too, due process, all sorts of other things. They had very specific intentions when they wrote it. And instead of making that clear in the text, they sort of just used these broad statements, and everyone just kind of knew, oh yeah, well, we know what they're talking about. The issue of that day, the issue had been for decades leading up to that, and decades following that, was the treatment of slaves, freed slaves. What do you do with people now that the war is over? We've got the 13th Amendment. What happens next? We don't want southern states depriving people of these rights. That was the whole point of all of this stuff. And instead of making it clear in the text itself and writing it in a way that limits what the federal government can do, they use this broad language. And then for a half century, the court system basically didn't, behave themselves. And then you get into the progressive era, and they picked it. They used this over and over and over again, as well as other vague statements in the Constitution, to completely undermine and destroy what the Constitution is actually trying to do, including the 14th Amendment itself. And so we're always going to have to be fighting this battle constantly without amendments. And unfortunately, amendments, the whole idea of an amendment is when something in the Constitution is broken, we're going to pass amendments to fix it or to clarify something or whatever. That was the whole point of it. But the way the system is set up today, that just isn't going to happen in Washington. It just isn't. And that's why what I'd really like to see the right lean into more is Article 5 convention type stuff, where they take very limited issues and they say, we're going to pass an amendment through that channel, where state legislatures on their own can propose amendments and approve amendments and ratify amendments. And we don't need to have the federal government involved at all. Actually, it's never been done. It's gotten close in some cases, but it's never happened. And that, I think, if the right spent a lot more energy and time on that, it would probably be really healthy, because at the state level, there are a lot more reasonable people working in state legislatures, including in blue states. There are more reasonable people. Washington, D.C. is a swamp full of corruption and people who are climbers, and they don't care about all this stuff, and they're beholden to big donors and all that. At the state level, there's definitely that exists, but it's not nearly as bad. There's a lot of regular people who are just trying to do the right thing. And so I think that this should be, I hope this becomes a wake-up call where people say, you know what, there is this other pathway of getting an amendment. The Congress is completely dysfunctional, especially the Senate. Why don't we just lean into what states can do and empower the states? That's where all of the action really is anyway, with laws getting passed. And the conservatives have an advantage at the state level. So I would love to see this be a wake-up call for that. I don't think that will happen, but I am hopeful that it will, and I think that is the right tactic.
If anybody else wants to comment on this issue, now is the time to jump in, because otherwise I'm going to move us along, because we're.
Let me just mention one thing. What Justin was talking about. The reason we have not ever had an Article 5 amendment is because it has to go through. Congress has to endorse it for a vote of the states, and so the states have sent resolutions to Congress over the decades for balanced budget amendments, for example, and the states have sent those to the Congress, those resolutions, and Congress has simply not acted on them. That is it seems like some sort of a flaw in the system, but it's what we have to overcome. And it seems to me that one way to do that is for the people, and especially through organizations such as ourselves, to make sure that potential members of Congress will be asked that question, that if a balanced budget amendment comes to Congress, will you vote to endorse it and send it on to the states for a vote? We really need to hold our congressmen, Congress people accountable for that going forward, and that's the way to get this done.
Yeah, I just want to add real quick. I mean, Justin and I actually did talk about this on the phone. So he didn't talk to Sam, but he did talk to me. I don't know if that's good or bad, but I mean, obviously, I think this is a bad decision. I was not happy talking with Justin about this earlier this week. It's always very depressing that the Democrats on the Supreme Court, and I'm not just going to say that they were justices appointed by Democrats. The Democrats on the Supreme Court never, ever, ever split. Their legal decisions are really just political decisions that reflect their policy preferences every single time. It's very discouraging. The media would tell you that the Republican appointed justices who are radical and all this stuff. Hey, at least they split from time to time, which is why we get these decisions. So, woe be upon the United States if the left gets to appoint 5 or 6 more justices. We'll never have any decisions like this in the future. But, look, I think Thomas's dissent got it right. The sponsor of the 14th Amendment said at the time that it's not intended to include people here, not here legally or here just visiting. And as Thomas pointed out in, again, his excellent dissent, it was because slaves and the families of slaves had never known any other home. And they were still being denied full citizenship rights, and even despite being under the jurisdiction thereof of the United States. It's the only home they had ever known. Justin and I kind of disagreed, that phrasing, jurisdiction thereof, is too vague. Not at the time, not if you, the justices could read what was said at the time that it was introduced and understand the context very clearly. And frankly, this doesn't include Justin, of course, but, it includes the justices on the Supreme Court and the people who are on the left, the Democrats, and the people supporting this decision. I am just sick and tired of the left and Democrats just pretending to not understand stuff, including the meaning of words and the intent of legislators when they introduce the 14th Amendment, just so they can get their way. We know what this means. We are the only country in the world that has birthright citizenship. It should be obvious that the 14th Amendment does not include wealthy people from China flying to Guam or San Francisco, having a kid, and then flying home. By our law, that baby is a United States citizen. That's not what the 14th Amendment is supposed to protect, yet the Supreme Court actually allows that to continue. I think the only follow-up to this is that, okay, if you're going to have an anchor baby here and fly back to China or fly somewhere else, and guess what? Every cent of that baby's income in the future is subject to United States tax, federal tax. And I hope we start going after those people so at least we get some money out of it. But the decision stinks.
Well, here's a decision that doesn't stink. From the Daily Caller, Supreme Court rules that Trump can fire executive officials. What? The head of the executive can make hiring and firing decisions at the executive level? The Supreme Court ruled Monday morning that President Donald Trump can fire bureaucrats from the executive branch. In the 6-3 decision on Trump versus Slaughter, the court ruled that the FTC's for-cause removal provision is contrary to the separation of powers enshrined in the Constitution. The ruling states that officers in the executive branch who derive their offices from the president's appointment must remain accountable to the president, meaning those officers must be removable by the president. Trump had removed Rebecca Slaughter, a former aide to Democratic New York Senator Chuck Schumer, from the FTC in March 2025. So it has been suggested by Sam that this is one of the most important cases that came recently out of the courts. Why?
Good question, Linnea, and thank you for asking. I think that this is one of the most consequential decisions in decades. The decision reverses a precedent that has existed since around 1935, which was in the Humphreys executive case. And basically what that did was it said the president doesn't have control over these independent agencies, supposedly independent agencies created by Congress to execute the laws passed by Congress and the president. Well, that is simply not right at all. That is not the way the Constitution is supposed to work. And what this does is it reestablishes the system that our founders built. And it was great to see that that clip of John Adams, because John Adams was one of the people who understood exactly what was going on. What our constitutional system did was it created a government in which the only way the government was allowed to act was if everybody agreed that it was acceptable, it was right under the Constitution and the right thing to do. So that's why we had the separation of powers. That's why we had the different levels of government, federal, state, and local. That's why we had different duties given to each of those departments, each of those branches of government, and to each of those levels of government. So what this did was it created something beautiful that had never existed before, and that was veto power for everyone. If the president wanted to do something, but Congress didn't want to make it into law and didn't want to fund it, it didn't happen. If Congress wanted to do something and the president signed it and the Supreme Court said, wait a minute, that's not in the Constitution, it didn't happen. If the federal government did something and the states recognized that it wasn't constitutional, they were not bound by it. It didn't happen. That was the vision our founders had. And what that did was it gave veto power to everybody, and it made for limited government, because no matter what somebody wanted to do, no matter what faction or majority could be put together in any of those branches of government or any of those levels of government, what they wanted could not happen unless everyone else agreed with it. So factions could not create artificial majorities. Factionalism was what, I'm sorry about the sound back there, but factionalism was what President Madison, before he was president, of course, James Madison was talking about as the biggest danger in our form of government that we were building at that time. That small factions could get together and benefit themselves, use the government to benefit themselves. And John Adams said explicitly that the only way for a government of this sort to work is for a moral people. And Adams recognized that the ability to vote power and riches to one another through the government would in itself ultimately corrupt people and create the very foundations for its destruction. Well, by the time we get to 1935 and the Humphreys executor decision, the government has created the foundations for this takeover. It created the independent bureaucracy and the deep state, none of which were answerable to the people. And therefore, and through that, small groups of people, factions, as Madison called them, could get their privileges passed into law and made into law and made into the law of the land. And so small groups of people could get what they wanted from the government. And then bigger and bigger and bigger groups of people signed on. And that's why we have things like Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, all these so-called entitlements, food stamps, defense spending of immense proportions, and a federal debt that is now more than the country produces in a year. You put all that together, this is all an outcome of that mentality and an outcome of Humphrey's executor. Humphrey's executor is dead. Long live the United States of America.
I knew you had no strong feelings about that whatsoever, Sam. But yeah, no, and just in short, for the sake of the audience, to kind of tie it all together, practically what this means is that, and correct me someone please if I'm getting this wrong here, but practically what this means is that one of the main mechanisms of what we would call like the forever state, which is being able to have these top bureaucrats within these different departments that are there no matter who the administration is, who for some reason we've just, I guess because of the Humphrey decision, we're not allowed to fire for a long time. But right. Trump said, heck no, yes. Who's the executive? Me. I'm the boss. I'm firing all of these guys. And they've been kind of pitching a fit about it, but now it seems he can continue post haste with the continuation of draining the swamp. And that's what the swamp is, guys. The swamp yes. is our elected representatives to an extent, but mostly the swamp is the forever state that previously was not able to be gotten rid of, no matter who the administration was.
That's permanent right. Bureaucracy.
Yeah. That's exactly right. And fundamentally, what was being argued is that it's possible, because nowhere in the Constitution is there any sort of they never imagined that there would be independent government agencies that are unaccountable to the executive branch, but are in the executive branch sort of, and then paid by the taxpayers and all of that, and that you couldn't get rid of the people in charge of them unless you passed a whole new law that effectively fired them and or removed the agent. There's nothing in there about that at all. Nothing. So what we have to assume, though, is that it's possible for Congress and a president to pass a law that says we're going to set up a system that is completely unconstitutional, but we agree that we're going to do it. And the reality is the Constitution is the highest law when we're talking about this. And so the Constitution is the highest law. You can't pass a law that says we're going to change effectively the way the Constitution works. You know, it would be the same. It would be like saying if Congress and the president woke up one day and passed a law that said that the president gets to pass all of the budgets unilaterally. And it's like, well, you can't do that because the Constitution says that that's not how it works. And Constitution trumps whatever federal law you're passing. And so that's what had happened in effect. Is the Supreme Court basically allowed it to go on for 100 years or so. And it was completely absurd, but it was driven by this very progressive vision for transforming society through a bureaucracy, which is a German idea that comes from the 1800s, and is destroyed the country and the credibility of the federal government for a very long time. So I agree with Sam. This is a huge, huge, huge decision that is going to have implications that go on for until the Supreme court is run by leftists and they reinstate some version of this, will transform the way the federal government works for a very, very long time. And Jim said he didn't want to, in the chat here, he says he doesn't want to mention anything about this, but I'll just give a Jim argument. When Jim and I were talking on the phone about this, Jim said that one of the things that's so amazing about this decision is that you have these executive officers, these people who are in the government, you can't ever get rid of them. And I've just totally lost my train of thought. So forget it. I'm sorry.
No, I think
I let you down.
Remember, I said, I was going to keep my mouth shut, but now I have to.
No, keep it.
You.
What was it? It was such a good argument.
The argument that the left was making is that this was like,
yes,
we're
that's
going
the
to,
one.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh no. So see, guys, you're going to like this. When we get Trump out of there and we take over, we're going to fire all of Trump's people and fill them all with a bunch of Democrat appointees. And I'm like, your terms are acceptable. Because we would finally, at least for the first time in my lifetime, not have left-wing apparatchiks trying to rule every detail of my life. I'll take it. I'll take a turnover on that every 4 or 8 years.
Yeah, this is going to benefit the conservatives, limited government people, far more than this is going to benefit the people that are building this forever state over time. And we have over 100 years of data that shows that this system has worked very well for the other side, where they just keep growing the deep state over and over and over again, and we never get to get rid of anybody. So the idea that, well, don't you realize when we come in power, we're going to get to put in our people? Your people are everywhere. What are you talking about? That's the way it's worked for 100 years. I don't even want the position. See, I don't want you to, I don't want to put somebody in some position of government at some quote unquote independent agency and then be afraid that you might put someone else in. I don't want the agency. I want to get rid of the whole thing. So this works entirely in our favor. It was a great point by Jim that I forgot, but it was a great point by Jim. And I think that's why the left is melting down over that decision.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
And we're glad that it did. So this is going to be very consequential in the long run. It's the kind of thing that, not too many people in the commentariat are talking about in any great detail, which is why I wanted to make sure that we hit on it. I was going to talk about the transgender sports thing because I didn't even notice that this had gone through because it was just so not on the radar of so many different organizations that I follow. So very, very glad to have that covered here. And you guys, this is the kind of thing that you're not going to see like really splashy headlines and stuff when it takes effect. It's the kind of thing that's going to help us in a major way underground for a very long time. So, all right, I'm just going to run through this next one really quick because I want to get us into our main topic here today, which is Independence Day. But SCOTUS also decided that they're going to decide on the constitutionality of so-called assault weapons bans. So the cases dispute laws in Illinois and Connecticut questioning the constitutionality of banning AR-15 platforms and similar semi-automatics under the 2nd and 14th Amendments. That would be Grant versus Higgins and Viramontes versus Cook County. They will be heard together in the Supreme Court's October term. So they will help to outline a legal definition of assault weapons and what exactly the heck that means, because nobody knows, and judge on the constitutionality of broad firearm bans. So the two are pretty much more or less the same kind of thing, which is why they're putting them together. In Grant versus Higgins, Connecticut has a state level ban on the sale, transfer, or possession of what they call assault weapons, which they define as any select firearm capable of fully automatic, semi-automatic, or burst fire at the option of the user. Grant's not challenging the ban on automatic or burst, but the ban on all semi-automatic weapons that meet the state's criteria. Among the banned firearms are many commonly used rifles like the AR-15, along with semi-automatic pistols and shotguns. So according to the appeal, the Supreme Court precedent holds that firearms can't be banned if they're in common use for lawful purposes. So the plaintiffs in Viramontes versus Cook County argue, if the most popular rifle in the country, which is the AR-15 platform rifle, is not considered in common use, it's hard to see what the phrase could possibly mean, which is a very good argument. And it's an argument that has been attempted to be made at the state level and has failed in many different jurisdictions. But now it is making it to the Supreme Court. I am hoping that this doesn't go wrong. I have a horrible feeling in my gut that Roberts is going to want to play word games. And that ACB is going to go along with it because she tends to follow what his decisions are. But man, this could be a big one. This could just make it so that they can't ban AR-15s anymore or other semi-automatics. So that would be very nice. And once again, like the AR-15 platform rifle is the most popular rifle in the United States.
Yeah. I think this is a huge. I'm really excited about this decision. I think it's huge. Yeah. And just to touch real quick on to what I talked about with vague statements in the 14th Amendment, the way that this has worked in our favor is related to gun rights. The whole vision of the Second Amendment was completely, just as all of the amendments, it was about restricting what the federal government could do. It was not, for the most part, about what states can do. And then the 14th Amendment, so originally states could regulate guns, but the Second Amendment is so crystal clear in all of the evidence from the founding era. It's so crystal clear. This was a complete prohibition on any regulations of arms ownership, period, for the federal government. That was the whole point. The federal government cannot tell you that you can't own a weapon. And the whole idea was because we want people to be able to defend themselves against the crazy, out of control federal government. That was a big part of the argument. And so then when the 14th Amendment comes along and it's now talking about these rights that states can't take away from anybody, well, now if we take the Second Amendment and we read it the way it was always read, and now we apply it to the states, now we have no gun regulations for anybody of any kind at any level that's allowed. And this is one of the reasons why I said the 14th Amendment is creating a lot of problems because of the way that they wrote it. But it's a huge problem for the left, because now what the Supreme Courts have been doing over the past couple of decades is they've been finally recognizing that, to be consistent with the way we've done the 14th Amendment on other issues, we got to do it with gun rights too. And now they're making it harder and harder and harder for states and local governments to regulate guns, which is exactly the way it should all work if we're going to be consistent. And if the Supreme Court is even remotely consistent on this issue at all, this is going to be a huge, huge, huge case for gun rights. The left is going to go completely insane over it. I know we got to wait like a year probably to get the final decision on this or something, but it's going to be an amazing thing if it happens. I'm always skeptical, like Linnea said, that we'll get a good decision out of Roberts and Comey Barrett, but I do have hope on this particular issue because of how wildly inconsistent the court has been in the way that they talk about these rights that the 14th Amendment is imposing on the states. So I have high hopes for this one.
Barrett does have a habit of looking at various words and parsing their meaning with, let's say, extraordinary precision or extraordinary creativity. And my guess is that this thing does not, that these laws do not pass muster, that they won't pass muster, that they will be stricken down. And the reason being precisely that the language is so absurdly wrong. Now, personally, I think that the 14th Amendment is very clear in this regard. What it says is that the states can't regulate ownership or even carrying of firearms in any way. What they can regulate using their police powers is what you can do with them. So they can tell you that, well, look, you can't use these guns to shoot people just willy-nilly. That's already against the law.
They can regulate gun ranges.
What are you all complaining about?
They can regulate the use of gun ranges. That's about it. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I think that's exactly right. And it's like, sounds like a radical position to say, no, basically no one, but that's the consequences of having a vague statement about states not being able to infringe on people's rights. And even the terms that were used, Linnea, when she was reading from that, she talked about, the common, it's like if a gun is commonly owned or well, where does it say that? In what part of the Constitution does it say that? That's not what it says. It doesn't say commonly owned arms. No, it says arms, because it was a total prohibition on any kind of federal regulation of weaponry, because the whole idea was, if we need to rebel against the federal government or repel invaders on the spot, which were problems in their time that they had to actually deal with, then we need regular people to have whatever weapons of war. That's what we need them to have. So I think this is, someday the Supreme Court will do the right thing on this. Is that today? I don't know, but I hope so.
Yeah,
May I just add one thing? That the whole idea that the well-regulated militia passage denies, or gives the state the right to regulate very radically the ownership of firearms, that's wrong, because that was thrown out by the 14th Amendment. Clearly.
Yeah.
Plus, well-regulated militias were made of regular people who just lived in their homes and owned guns and went out. They weren't in some special national
guard. The states
guard.
can't regulate that now.
I know.
For 125 years.
I believe that the in common use for lawful purposes, and I might be wrong about this, but what I have heard is that particular phrasing existed specifically because when the Supreme Court was hearing these cases with regards to, because it's in common use for lawful purposes. And the point was they wanted to ban automatics like the Tommy gun to take the mob out. And so it was like a targeted anti-mob thing that they were going for.
That's actually the very first time the Supreme Court ruled on gun rights was in the 1930s. I don't remember the case, but it was an incredible decision. It's literally the opposite of what they argue today. And what the decision was that if you have weapons that are not commonly used for warfare, basically, like you wouldn't use it in a militia, it's not common warfare weaponry, then we can regulate it. So they were talking about like sawed-off shotguns and things like that, and they were saying these things are not they're used by gangsters, but nobody's actually using this in a militia. That was the argument they were making. And now today it's the opposite, and they say, actually, if it's a weapon of war, then you don't get to have it. And so they've completely flipped on their position. It's the most unbelievable thing. And it shows you how inconsistent, because these are both progressives making both of these decisions, how ultimately, I don't know who said it earlier, but ultimately the court is going to try to find a way to the liberals on the court to get whatever the conclusion. They start with the conclusion and then they figure out a way to reason to it. And that's how it's not supposed to work that way, but that's how they've done it. But this is a really great opportunity to fix this. And I think it'll be really hard for them to pull it out once this becomes the law of the land and you have AR-15s everywhere. I mean, what are you going to do? Go house to house? It becomes a huge problem for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of militias taking up arms against the government, which is what the Second Amendment is for, in 1774, the House of Commons in Britain was debating what to do about the colonies. The Townshend Acts, which levied high tea duties on the colonies, had not resulted, like they had intended, in the people calming down. Rather, things were getting a lot worse for the crown there. The Boston Tea Party occurred a few months prior, and so MP Fuller wanted to repeal the tax, and the Whig Edmund Burke agreed. And so he said this, shortened a bit, because he goes on for quite some time. He goes, if intemperately, unwisely, fatally, you sophisticate and poison the very source of government by urging subtle deductions odious to those you govern from the unlimited nature of some supreme sovereignty, you will teach them to call that sovereignty itself into question. When you drive him hard, the boar will turn upon the hunters. If that sovereignty and their freedom cannot be reconciled, which will they take? They will cast your sovereignty into your face. Nobody will be argued into slavery. The Englishman in America will feel that this is slavery, that it is legal slavery will be no compensation either to his feelings or his understanding. Fuller's motion to repeal the tea tax was defeated 204 votes to 49. and everyone found out that he and Edmund Burke were exactly right. On July 2nd, today, 1776, the Continental Congress's meeting minutes read thus: resolved that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved. Resolved that this Congress will tomorrow again resolve itself into a committee of the whole to further consider the Declaration on Independence. There is solemnity, gravity in all of the contemporary writings surrounding the last days before the Declaration of Independence was signed and afterwards. Today, we have Independence Day as like kind of a fun, goofy holiday celebrating the end of British rule, but that's not what it was for them at the time. It was the official breaking point after which years of war followed. The Revolutionary War didn't officially end until the Treaty of Paris was signed in 1783, 7 years after the Declaration. Guys, 250 years since 1776. What a ride. As we've just been discussing for this entire show here, we are an insanely young country, actually, and it was from completely the ground up. And there have been so many changes that, you know, we're still kind of wrestling with today. I was asked a couple of months ago a question for a Stossel video. You can find it's floating around somewhere out there. They put out a America at 250 video. And the question that I was asked was, what made us different or unique? And it was a much harder question than I thought to answer. And I think I drove them insane because I was just kind of like going on and on talking about all these different things that were floating around in my head. I don't think they loved it when I started talking about like de Tocqueville and stuff and what his observations were on what was different here. And it went really well, but we really did start a whole country from the ground up with the basic understandings of you know, what British common law and like the Magna Carta and stuff, you know, form some of our foundations. But we were out there separated by an entire ocean from the mother country, so to speak, and really had to make our own way, which is part of the reason why when they started levying massive duties on our goods coming into our ports and stuff, it was odious. It was not fair at all, because we had already been more or less independent, operating more or less independently. And then all of a sudden, the crown wants to treat us like a vassal more than we had in the past. And that's what Burke was kind of getting at was, look, you can just put it back to the way it was and all of this will settle down. There's no stomach for war if you stop here. But of course, there was, for whatever reason, a hunger in the parliament to punish the colonials basically for getting uppity, especially after the Boston Tea Party. And so, man, you guys, what would your answer be? What made us different? What's the one thing that like pops out to you?
Well, I can't take responsibility for this. I think it was Alexander Hamilton that said that the United States, and I think he said this maybe during the Constitutional Convention or maybe in the days before the Declaration of Independence signing, the United States was the first time that a nation was not created by accident or by force. It was created by reflection and choice. And that's just a very interesting way of looking at it. I think that what those people did at that time, they were mostly young guys in their 20s and 30s. They had everything to lose, but what did they do? They put it on the line because they felt so strongly in the principle that they should be free and that they were being taken advantage of by the king primarily, but also by the parliament, and that they were being mistreated. And I think that they are some of the most heroic people maybe ever. And not only that, they're also incredibly brilliant. They put together this system that's still in place 250 years. It's not perfect. We're not perfect, but America's the greatest country on earth. I am so blessed to be an American, and I'm just ecstatic for what's going to happen this weekend.
Yeah, I think the way that when I've been asked questions like this before, the thing that I think of is you have the American Revolution and you have the French Revolution. And they occur roughly around the same time, influenced by many of the same people. Thomas Paine, for example, the writer of Common Sense, heavily involved in the American Revolution, was also very involved in the French Revolution, went to France and everything. Lafayette was a French noble who came to America and participated in the American Revolution, was one of the most important figures in the American Revolution, went back to France. And so there was a lot of ideas. And in fact, there were many people in America at the time of the French Revolution, which occurred after the American Revolution, that said, we need to go help them and get involved in this revolution that they're having. But the French Revolution ended very badly for people who don't know. There was a lot of blood in the streets, guillotines, kings and queens dragged out of their homes, murdered. There was, and then eventually the leaders of the revolution were killed by other people who were angry, a part of the mob, and eventually they ended up going back to a dictatorship, and then sort of restoring monarchy in some sense, and more dictatorship, and it was a total mess in the French Revolution. And the American Revolution worked out much, much better. And foundationally, the issue, because a lot of it was influenced by Enlightenment ideas, many of the same thinkers were involved. But I think foundationally, what is the difference? What made America successful and these other countries that have done it since, including the French, not as successful with this, I think is it's in the Declaration of Independence itself. It's the idea that there are certain inalienable rights endowed by a creator, and that those rights, they're inalienable, means non-transferable. They cannot be destroyed, cannot be taken away. It's higher than the laws of men. It's higher than a king that imposes his will, or a queen or her will on the people. They supersede all of that. And if foundationally you believe in this idea that there is an objective truth, whatever you want to make of that, and that your rights come from a higher power that is higher, there's a higher law than all of the laws that are of men, then you have these guardrails in place that keep you from sliding off into crazy revolutions or authoritarian mobs or all of the other things that happened to so many other countries, socialist revolutions, et cetera, et cetera. Socialist revolutions often start by people overthrowing tyrannical, really bad governments, getting rid of the really bad tyrannical government like the Tsar, in Russia or something, is not necessarily a bad thing. But then what happens after that? Do you have any guardrails, moral guardrails? And what you see over and over and over again throughout history is if you don't have a firm sense of a higher truth with inalienable rights, and that those rights belong to each individual person, no matter how rich or poor, no matter what you do for a living, that you have these inalienable rights and no one can take them away from you, or should justly. If you have that mindset in place, then the natural result of that is some form of freedom. And it's almost always going to be better than if you don't have those principles in place. And I think what made America so special was that you had great leadership. You had, a lot of really important ideas. So, there was a lot of things that had going for it, natural resources and all of these other things made America very successful, vast amounts of land. But fundamentally, the people, from the poorest person to the richest person, even the people who were, deists and didn't believe in traditional Christianity or anything like that, they did fundamentally all believe that I have rights, me as an individual person, and you, the king, can't come and just take my rights away because you're the king. That's not how this works. The rights that I have come from something higher than you even. And that idea, once it gets into the bloodstream, it is impossible for a tyrannical government to maintain control over a long period of time. And if the people really truly believe it, they will not turn into the French Revolution where they're murdering people in the streets, because they have a guardrail too. Your neighbor has the same inalienable rights that you have, and you can't just go around chopping people's heads off because you don't agree with them. And so you have to have that in place. And the most dangerous thing for the republic in the long term, and the reason why socialism, part of the reason why socialism is becoming so popular in America, as we discussed earlier, is we've moved further and further away from this idea that there are firm, established rights that are given to us by a higher power that cannot be taken away by a king, by a dictator, or by a mob of people who want to vote the rights out, because collectivization is supposedly going to lead to a better outcome. Fundamentally, the better outcome is not the most important thing. The most important thing is you have an inalienable right. And the inalienable right doesn't go away because you get to say, well, you know, if we just did this thing, then GDP would go up. Or if we just did that, then more people would have access to health insurance. Well, what does that have to do with my inalienable rights? You don't get to take that away. That was given by a higher power, and you, the mob, doesn't have the ability to do that. You don't have the right to do that. And if we can get back into that mindset, it doesn't necessarily have to be a hyper-religious version of it, but if we can get back to the mindset of each individual person has rights that can never be taken away justly, ever, under any circumstances, no matter how good the argument is, and then that's our North Star, I think we will be just fine. We'll be around for another 250 years. We'll be around for 1,000 years. For as long as there's people on this earth, we'll be around, as long as that's the North Star. If we lose that, and we've been losing it for decades, if we continue in that direction, we will not survive as a country. We'll become the French Revolution eventually, some version of that, more modernized perhaps, but the same ultimate outcome of society collapsing because of the mob. And so if we're going to take anything away from the American Revolution, I think it's got to be that. Who are we? Who do we want to be in the future? And why are we the greatest country in the world? If we look to the past, we'll see that's the blueprint for the future for us.
To me, what made the United States of America so new, different, truly unique was the idea of self-government. What happened was these inalienable rights that we had, as Justin said very eloquently, made it clear that if you're bumping up against your neighbor, we have to figure out whose rights to life, liberty, and or property are being infringed upon there. And so that was the purpose of government in the United States, was to protect the lives, liberty, and property of the people. And that created a system of self-government that was built to protect those inalienable rights. You notice that in France, the getting rid of the monarchy immediately resulted in dictatorships, a series of dictatorships, which ended in Napoleon, ended for a time in Napoleon, and then other things occurred, and they ultimately went with the sort of Bismarck plan, as Justin mentioned earlier about what infected the United States. They had the same idea about rights as we did, but they didn't have any experience of self-government and any understanding of self-government. Americans could look back to the so-called Glorious Revolution of the Puritans and Oliver Cromwell, in which what really happened there was that the Parliament, the legislature, made the rights of the people, placed the rights of the people in their own care, and said that the monarch has only a certain amount of authority. And what that did was it gave the notion that sovereignty belongs to the people. Now, in Britain, it didn't. Even after that, it didn't belong to the people. But in the United States, right from the beginning, sovereignty belonged to the people as a whole. And that, plus the idea of unalienable rights or inalienable rights, whichever you want to call them, that plus those two concepts made self-government the governing principle of this new nation. And that is where we get the notion that we govern ourselves by veto power. That the only thing that the government, the sovereign, the people are allowed to do is something that has no objections to it among the major groups that comprise the sovereign in this country. The three branches of government, the states, and the people. Self-government is the foundation of the American way. It is what has made us great for a quarter of a millennium now. And as Justin pointed out, could last forever. It can, but we have to keep renewing it. And that was what Thomas Jefferson was talking about when he said that the tree of liberty is nourished by the blood of tyrants. We have to keep renewing our belief in self-government and stop allowing the government to lure us into dependency on other people. When we do that, we deny the very foundations of our government, of our society. We have to turn away from that. We have to accept the responsibility of self-government and take joy in that and renew it. And I believe that we're in the process of doing that, but there is a mighty amount of work left for us. It's nowhere near what it was in 1776, but it gets closer every day.
Yeah. I mean, before we got into this podcast today, Linnea had sent a message, what is it that you love about America? And there was my first instinct, and I'm kind of ashamed of it, was that I thought initially my thought was, a lot about what I love about America, I feel has largely been lost because I'm of a certain age. But I have actually turned around on that. I mean, one of the things I thought about that I love about America is part of my past. When I was a boy, I was a Boy Scout, Boy Scouts of America. And it taught me how to be proud of my country and my flag and how to respect it. And that's where you learn the values that make you a good citizen and eventually a good man. I am proud that the Boy Scouts of America in the 1980s was what it was. I love that 250 years ago, the elite of our society, they risked their lives of themselves and their families, their children, to throw off an oppressive government, the sovereignty of kings, and replace it eventually fully with one based on the sovereignty of the individual, no matter what their station is in society. It was a absolutely revolutionary, in the real sense of the word, concept in the world in the 18th century. I love, and you got this from all these Europeans that have come to the United States for the World Cup. I love that our country covers a continent from one side to the other. And each state has its own individual character and history, but they're not so unique in character and history that you lose what it means to be an American and love your country and your countrymen. And that our landscape is just so beautiful. I love that others are coming here for the first time, really experiencing what we take for granted. I love that the United States of America is the most powerful and the wealthiest country in the history of human civilization, not just in raw terms, but comparatively with other nations. And we, unlike every other society and nation in such a position, we did not use that power to conquer. We liberated others. We gave them a chance at freedom and then pretty much left them alone. That is a absolutely moral miracle for a nation. And it's because of the way our society and our government was set up by the founding fathers 250 years ago. We fought an unimaginably bloody and a destructive civil war in this country that ended slavery. And then we had the wisdom to do the very hard work of bringing the country back together. And there were no more insurrections like the Civil War. I don't love that, of course, but I'm extremely proud of my country for doing that. It has become too fashionable in this country to look at the negatives, and every country has sins. The 250th birthday of the United States is not the time to think about those. And when you will hear people out there that are going to be, dumping on this country on its 250th birthday, ignore all of it. This is the most remarkable country ever founded on this earth, ever in the history of human civilization. And there really isn't anything close to it. That is something talk about birthright. That's why birthright citizenship should be protected. I don't want to get political again, but it is the birthright of everybody blessed to live in this country, on this continent. And that inheritance must be protected, and it must be added on with the same level of honor, integrity that we, from those who made it like that, with their honor and their integrity, and we pass it on to others. It's humbling. It should be humbling to each of us that we are able to celebrate a 250th anniversary. As Linnea said, that is very young in the terms of many nations, but I believe the French have had 5 republics since our founding, so I think we're doing pretty well.
Chris, I don't recall if you got to speak yet on this.
Oh, I did. I mean, I keep it really simple. I feel so blessed to have freedom. I am someone who just loves freedom, loves liberty, loves the ability to not be told what to do, to make my own choice, have my agency, make my way in life. And I feel very blessed because I am well aware, unlike many Americans, that that is not the case around this world. And also just wanted to kind of talk about, Justin and Sam talked a lot about the French Revolution versus the American Revolution. I studied the French Revolution a ton in college. I was very interested in it. And I think one of the words that comes to me is the American Revolution was humble. We knew that government, as Madison said, is almost trying to prevent, the worst of our, impulses and instincts. The French Revolution, they thought, we're going to make the perfect world. We're going to do year 0. We're going to just start from scratch and we're going to make everything perfect. That to me is so misguided because humans are fallible. I am not super religious. I'm actually a deist, and I just read a really good book about deism. So Thomas Paine is really on top of my mind recently. I absolutely 1000% believe in the creator. I believe then that there is something greater than us. And I do believe, as Justin, said, and this point is just so obvious, that our rights come from that creator. They do not come from someone who just says, I am more powerful than you, and therefore I should deem what your life should be. I think this really goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the show with the rise of democratic socialism. Democratic socialism is almost like the French Revolution. It's saying that we can perfect society. We cannot perfect society because we're humans and we're fallible. The best thing we can do is say that we're going to try to make a government in which we are going to help each other when we need help, but we're not going to use force and coercion to do that. That's why I love America.
Yeah. And I love all of those things too, but I guess I would say one of my favorite parts of America that just like is the thing that stands out the most in my mind, other than our, overt patriotism that no other country on the planet participates in for their own country. England comes probably the closest, but they think it's inappropriate, gaudy, a little bit offensive for you to walk into a American small town and see a flag on every single store shop front porch when it's not even Independence Day. You have some towns that are like that here. I love Americans. I love that you can spot us from a mile away when we're tourists in other countries. I love that we frighten Germans when they come to this country and they're like minding their own business at the beach or something, and someone's like, oh, hey, how are you doing? and that makes them upset and frightened. I love that. I love Daniel Boone. I love all of our great explorers. I love New Yorkers and how mean they are. I love Southerners and their own culture and their kindness and hospitality and the kind of leftovers of the old English aristocracy kind of attitudes that still exist in places of the deep South, like Georgia and South Carolina. I love Button Gwinnett, who is one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence that nobody knows anything about. And the reason why no one knows anything about him is because he died like the next year because he got into a duel because he was so mean and so easily offended by things that he just popped off. And yet that's the same kind of person who would sign the Declaration of Independence in the end. I love Andrew Jackson and I love George Washington, everyone. I just, Americans are astonishing people. There's no one like us on the planet.
I also love our generosity. Look at what happened in Venezuela. Yeah. There's a horrible earthquake. Who was the first nation to go there and supply $300 million in aid? The United States of America. Whether it's an earthquake, whether it's a tsunami, whatever it is, natural disaster, anything. The United States is always the first country to go there and provide aid.
Absolutely.
I love that we went to the moon. I know you love
I love that we went to the moon. I love that the moon belongs to us and Mars belongs to us as well. It's all fantastic. I love that Americans have a true frontier, and I would never diminish the accomplishments of people from other countries, great men of other countries during the age of exploration and stuff. Some of my favorite things, some of my favorite topics of all time, as people who watch this show all the time know about me, is, and also the climate realism show, because I bring it up all the time, is I love the British Arctic expeditions and stuff. So I'm not saying that other countries don't do cool stuff, of course, but American does cool stuff in a very special way. We're the same frontier spirit that sent us, in literal covered wagons made out of wood and tarps into Indian territory, is the same frontier spirit that sent us to the moon in the end. And I just think it's unique and important. And we are a people who needs a frontier, and I think that we'll have to find another one, because I think that's part of the reason why we've been diminishing. Yeah, I know that we've been diminishing a little bit of late, is because I think we're kind of like that mouse experiment where we're all like super comfortable. We don't have anywhere to go. We're kind of kept, I guess, by ourselves actually. And so we're kind of losing our minds a little bit, but I think that's remediable. So I love this country. I love the people that have made this country. And that includes our viewers. And of course that includes our foreign viewers as well. It's just so important to me. I hate to see, people trying to diminish this year's 250th over political reasons, and also people on the right who are trying to make the 250th too much of a political thing for the right too. Not to say that Democrats don't hate America, because they certainly seem to recently, and that they shouldn't be chastised for that. But don't be the grumpy guy like at the fireworks celebration who sees their neighbor that they know is a Democrat and is like grumpy and a jerk about it. Like, come on, let's keep it together for this one day, and the days leading up to it, hopefully as well. But I guess I'll close us out here, because we did go over today, but we were a little bit late. And also this is an important topic, and I'm very glad that we were able to hit on as many topics as we were. I could have talked forever about the United States, and I certainly would love to continue this. We're going to keep up the America's 250th segment going forward, at least until the end of this year. Definitely until the end of this year, and not past that, because it is a bit of extra work for me. But we're going to keep it going because there's a lot of stuff that happened after the Declaration of Independence that's very important. I mean, we fought the war for 7 more years after that, so we are going to keep talking about it. But that is all the time we have for today, unfortunately. So thank you for all of our viewers here for their attention to these matters. We are live every week on Thursdays at noon Central on Rumble, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, all over the place. Jim, what have you for our audience today?
We have no climate realism show tomorrow. I know it's very, very sad, but it is. We are off for the 4th, so we are. We'll see you again, not this Friday, but the following Friday. And stay tuned to the very end of this podcast for a special treat.
Sam?
Thanks. We have plenty of good stuff at heartland.org and stkarnick.substack.com.
And Chris?
StoppingSocialism.com. We got some great new content up there. If you want to learn about these crazy DSA candidates, please go check it out.
Justin, what you got?
You can find me at Justin T. Haskins on all the social media channels, justinhaskins.com. And like Chris said, go to StoppingSocialism.com. We got to stop the socialists before they destroy our country.
Absolutely. For audio listeners, please rate us well on whatever service you're using and leave us a review. And if you're not subscribed, subscribe. And thank you so much to all of our panelists here, and also to our fellow Patriot viewers. Happy Independence Day. We will see you again next week.
We are in the very midst of revolution, the most complete, unexpected, and remarkable of any in the history of the world. How few of the human race have ever had an opportunity of choosing a system of government for themselves and their children. I believe, sirs, that the hour has come. My judgment approves this measure, and my whole heart is in it. All that I have, all that I am, and all that I hope in this life, I am now ready to stake upon it. While I live, let me have a country. A free country.